Okay, thank you so much, colleagues, and welcome to this wonderful meeting that we are going to have in this wonderful space. My name is Clemens Rusenga. I work with the Klashnik over there and Simon Howell and another colleague, new career store. I'm part of the Cannabis Africana project. We are looking forward to, and we're also happy to meet you here. I want to take this opportunity also to thank Meto for helping to organize this space. So actually did all the great work to make sure that all of us were in this space. And yesterday we had the first leg of this double header where we discussed about the project and also the methods and the ethical issues that especially us as researchers we deal with and we come across. And it was a good opportunity actually to learn from some of you because you work with the people and you know some of the issues that we as researchers might not understand or even have not experienced. So we are going to, I'm going to leave this time to Genot to come and just talk briefly about the Cannabis Africana project. And then after that, Simon Howell, he will come and just share a little bit on the South African context, and then Meto will come, and then from there we have a discussion because we have a Fields of Green for All and all the alliance partners, they are here. We have Cannabis Africana, they are here. So I think for me, this is an important occasion where researchers and the people who have the experience, who are in the on the ground and they have experienced all these struggles, whether it be on the police making side, and we are all in one space. And I believe that we are going to learn a lot today and share this experience, but also talk about how do we move forward with these kind of collaborations, which could be mutually beneficial to all of us. So Genot, you can come and just a little introduction to the Cannabis Africana project. Thank you.
Thanks, Clemens. Thanks everyone for coming. And I have to say, really sorry that some of the stuff I might say that I keep it very short might be similar to what I did yesterday, but there's some people here who were not here yesterday, so I'll repeat. Okay. So maybe you can sleep for the first few minutes. And you see even the date, I live in the past, it's from yesterday. So anyway, but yeah, so my name is Gernot. I sort of coordinate the project across 4 countries. And I'm based at the University of Bristol, and the project actually is a collaboration between Bristol and UCT. So, I mean, the South African sort of context is very important for us, that this project is actually grounded properly here. And what I wanted to do first, if this thing works, which might not be the case, it does, just to talk a little bit about the project. It's a 4-year project, which by research standards is kind of sort of medium length. There's much longer projects and there's slightly shorter ones. But we have quite a bit of time and we're sort of halfway through the project, but still we haven't really done most of what we want to do. And so I think one important thing yesterday and today is also actually to learn from you guys on what we should do or what we could do potentially, and what we can't actually do. That's very important. So we're in this kind of middle stage of the project where we still have that flexibility basically to do things slightly differently if we want to. And the main focus really of the project, that was the title as well, is on cannabis and cannabis and development essentially. Sort of drugs and development, Cannabis Africana drugs and development. And what we do is 4 things really, or we propose to do. So we look at cannabis from an intentionally historical perspective. We are very interested in how historically this plant has played different roles in different contexts in different parts of the African continent. And why we look at it historically, there's various reasons, partly because of our disciplinary backgrounds. I'm a trained historian, so that's what I do for sure. But also because we found a lot of the, no worries, at least everyone woke up. And you know, the thing with looking at the history is important, I think, because a lot of talk in the policy field on drugs, not just cannabis, is often very concerned with what's happening now. There's this concern, or there's this new problem of this drug appearing there, and so many people are using it. But actually, if you look to the past, you will find similar things happening. And often you can actually learn from the past and draw lessons for the present time as well. So that's how we justify this historical focus. We're also trying to look at the contemporary place of cannabis. We look at livelihoods specifically. What's the role of cannabis and livelihoods in rural areas and urban areas? And that makes it a bit different from most research on cannabis or drugs, which often takes a very criminal justice, policing, and also security focus, actually. What we also do is look at cultures of consumption in the different places that we study. So we study 4 countries, which I'll talk about in a second, and Simon will talk about South Africa specifically. Cannabis is the expert on Zimbabwe, and I work in Nigeria, and we still have some in Kenya. But we look at it in depth. So we are not interested in knowing how much cannabis there is in markets. We're not interested in how many, I mean, we are interested, but we are not trying to find out these details, because that usually requires huge research teams that do surveys of finding out how many people use or how many people produce and that kind of stuff. And it's often done by governments. What we do instead is very small scale kind of research, and actually talking to people about what this plant means to them. So it's a very qualitative type of research. We do interviews one-to-one, sometimes with the same people again and again, because the more you talk to them, the more you find out something. So that's our kind of methodology to approach, basically, very in-depth and focused. And we're also looking at policy. Initially, that wasn't really such a big focus, but because policy on cannabis is really changing in many places on the continent, so we're actually kind of forced to look at that more. And we're looking, on the one hand, at how policy affects people. So we're looking at how policy looks from below, basically. So what does it mean if, like the country I study, Nigeria, has a very, very repressive policy? Does it actually affect the growers of cannabis, or does it really not matter because they find ways around? And it's also important because policy changes, we see how do these policy changes affect. Yesterday we talked about smallholders, for example, in the Zimbabwean context or in South Africa. So we're looking at how policy change affects. That's the 4 areas we look at. So it's not, Nigeria is a huge place. We look at still a huge place in Nigeria, which is southwestern Nigeria, where it's the so-called cocoa belt, focus of agricultural production and cannabis production. We look at Western Kenya, which historically has been a center of production of cannabis as well as the use. And we look at Southeastern Zimbabwe, which Clemens can talk a bit more to get. And we also look at South Africa, and especially Eastern South Africa. So that's the kind of areas. Very small scale, as I said. Within those areas, we look at specific localities, sometimes villages actually, in Nigeria, where you have quite a lot of cannabis to find out what it means to people. But also cities where we talk with people selling and transporting. But it's all about cannabis and what it means to people's lives. And also in the history. Have I reached the time?
There's just somebody waiting to be admitted in the waiting room.
Should I press that? And you know, the thing why we chose those countries, I mentioned that yesterday already, it's because they are linked to our expertise, because it's sometimes not easy to
To do that. Representatives of Fields of Green for All in each one of the provinces and representatives from the communities to actually start speaking up and speaking up in a militant way. If you look on our Fields of Green for All YouTube channel, you will see my rant at the Cape Town Expo that I did on Saturday evening. Okay. And we're sick of it. We're really, really sick of it. But it doesn't help for me to be ranting, this white chick ranting on the stage, okay? If it just goes into an echo chamber. And I think we really need to ramp up our militant action because they're not listening to us. But what was fascinating in Nigeria is when I stood there and I said, as the only white woman for miles around, and I said, I'm not sick, I don't want to make socks, I just want to get stoned. And their eyes are like this. I said, yes, me, I know. Look, I've got my nice dress on today, and I'm very respectable, and I didn't bring any drugs into your country, and I didn't. It was the first time I crossed an international border without dacha in the last 30 years because I was too scared because I was traveling on my own. So we have to ramp up our message. You know, I know that our brothers and sisters in the Rastafari community are very, very outspoken, but it's enough of pussyfooting around everybody. So ramping up our message is very, very important to me and becoming more militant, but also joining forces with all the other organizations. Now, Klaas is here from Sandput, the South African network of people who use drugs. With Fields of Green for All, we've been doing a series of webinars on the legal aspects of cannabis so that the people, Klaas and his field workers, Angela from Sandput was here yesterday, can also learn from the lessons of cannabis, because the prohibition of all drugs is wrong and it's a human rights violation and it's fueling the crime in our country. And we, compared to what Klaas and his colleagues and his team have to do, I mean, imagine trying to legalize methamphetamine. You know, that's a much more difficult job than cannabis. So we have to get cannabis right for Klaas and his team and his field workers who have such an incredibly difficult job to do. So another reason why we're here today is because we need academic support. Because we need the people to be speaking out too. And that's why I was so honored to become part of this project. Because if you remember back to 2017 when we had the trial of the plant, Jules and I had to fight for those first 4 years that we were doing this work to keep our history expert. And a few times the lawyers said, we haven't got time, we haven't got money, you have to only get the crucial experts. And we said the history expert is incredibly, incredibly important. As Gernot said, you know, this history, we all know the history of cannabis in South Africa. So we had Dr. Craig Patterson on the stand, and he's the only person who finished his evidence in 2017. So the evidence is there already. It's on our YouTube channel, like 2 days. We have the state advocate calling Dr. Patterson a racist because he called the cannabis laws racist, and just quite an interesting dynamic. So we have the experts for the trial of the plant. We've got our academic experts. We've got our policy experts. Nick Heinem is here today, and he's probably spoken to the government more than any of us, okay? We've got our cannabis social club expert, Jacques back there, runs a very successful club, which is stuck in this gray area of the law. We were given our privacy, but you're not allowed to have a private club somehow. So we're helping the Hayes Club in there with their litigation. We've got Dr. Greeks Rennie here from the Mzimbubu Farmer Support Network, who will most probably, I'm hoping, become co-plaintiffs with me in the trial of the plant too. So I think this is really, really a unique gathering. We've got Juanita Booley there in the back, who's probably the best person for mobilizing mass action and getting to the communities, and she works a lot with women in the cannabis space, which is really important. Women and drug issues came up yesterday in the discussions. So I think really I'm quite blown away by the amount of experts that we have here, the elders. You know, everybody in this room is an expert. And we're here at the venerable UCT campus. So this idea of mobilizing has to go on every single different level. And that's why I wanted to introduce these amazing academics. And of course, you know that Simon is our criminology expert from the trial of plant too. He didn't get a chance to go onto the stand because we ran out of time in Pretoria. And then we have Nati Ferreira over there from the Dagga Pharmacy in Paarl, who's also been doing amazing stuff on the ground with teaching people how to grow their own weed. You know, grow your own. And also in the education space with Chiba Africa, who Nati quite often comes up to Johannesburg. Our property just outside Johannesburg is used as a classroom for Chiba Africa, and they are also doing widespread education. So I think that that's sort of enough from me. But what I really want you guys to do one by one is to, if you feel moved to speak about what you do in the space, and introduce yourself. That would be very important because it can be picked up by our researchers. And as I saw in Nigeria, every spare moment that Bernard and Clemens and Idioma got, they were out there, they were interviewing a grower, they were interviewing a trader. And as Bernard said, the most valuable and insightful information comes from the community and those people who have a close relationship with this plant. So that's the end of what we planned for this evening. And now what I'd like people to do is to please, so we've got Dr. Keith Scott from the South African Drug Policy Initiative, who's also been speaking to lots of politicians and also professional people like lawyers and doctors and that sort of thing. So here is a unique gathering because we have everybody from grassroots all the way to the lofty academics. You know, we've got Etienne van Sale here, who is our pet anthropologist, his job is to study human behavior. And the combination of human behavior and this really amazing plant is a very, very interesting combination, but we've got to get all the levels of it right. So I'd like to kick off with my brother Greek, who traveled all the way from Mpondoland to Durban and got a flight here to be with us. And has always been somebody who's been very, very close to my heart with the Mzimpubu Farmer Support Network. And we first met in 2015 when Jules and I went down to Mpondoland in response to the police spraying from the helicopters with the glyphosate poison on the fields. So Greek, if you would please introduce yourself and tell us please how you fit into this whole question, and maybe you can tell us a bit about your recent trip to Massachusetts and what you were doing in the US of A. And Greek was actually there with Dr. Ethan Nadelman, who's the head of the retired head of the Drug Policy Alliance in the USA. And Dr. Nadelman was also in Nigeria with us. So we really are all connected. So I'd like to kick off with Greek, and then we'll just do it spontaneously after that. If everybody could stick to about 5 minutes, just so we can get to know each other. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sending around a piece of paper and a pen. And if you could please write down your name, your organization, and your email, so that we can all stay in touch and we can actually, get something out of this meeting. Okay, so Greek, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
My name is Greek from Mpondoland. This is the city. Farmer Support Network, which is an NGO, but we started just as concerned people about the spraying of cannabis in Mpondoland, which we stopped, actually assisted by many organizations, and many others, specialists. Now we stop. It's great. Fortunately for us, there was a judgment in Cape Town on the cannabis, which was saying that actually growing cannabis, private use, it's not a crime. There's no law like that in South Africa. And right now, what we're doing advocacy and trying to push or promote the growers of cannabis in Mpondoland in the emerging economy of cannabis. Those are the people who have been growing even during the hard times on Dagga laws in South Africa. But unfortunately, that's backward now because of our government, especially Eastern Cape, where they're not moving on what to be done. Even if, when they get specialists to assist them on what to be done, it will be a paper thing and a political thing, no implementation. But what's happening? People there continue growing, but they're stuck now because of many challenges, which is already the case in life, that they have no market for the rentals. And while we deal with that assistant, and many guys here, such that the product is improved, value added, and while they're struggling with the improvement of the crop, the next thing, hybrids came in. And the smokers will know, which I think is most smokers there, they can see, they can feel normal smoking the land race, not like smoking the hybrid. So mostly people, the buyers now, the local buyers, they say, land race. So growers are staying with stacks and stacks of land race. On the other side, the government is not. They will say in the meetings that we have budget for this. We don't know what this budget is used for because they're not assisting the growers with the budget. So many specialists here advise the government to have processing places in central places, but the government is doing nothing about that. As the farmer support network where I work, we also go to them and talk to them. They will be nice to us and promising to assist. After that, quiet, nothing happens. I'm talking about something which started talking with them in 2018. And up to now, I'm saying it's quiet, we're doing nothing. The NGOs, some of them here, will go to the areas and assist. Actually, we started working there while Metro and Jules started working already in the communities. But there was not much change happening in the communities. It's still like that even now. What I've been thinking, especially after attending so many events on cannabis development, even here I was thinking when we're talking good things on this project, can we come up with something stronger and not really soft when we talk to the authorities, which will make implementation of what we want and what the people want. Because you can think of it from 2014, so many good things are said and we gather like this, so much is spent. Again, I don't see a change like one speaker has said. I don't see a change. Actually, when I went to US, I felt shaking. Like one friend. Now, we shouldn't worry about the outside people. There is a lot of money. We have the land, we have the water, we have the seed. We have the market. We just need a few things, but expensive things. So ways to process the cannabis. In me, I'm always feeling so worried. It became worse when I went to US, finding that the guys there have massive, huge, sophisticated industries in cannabis. I was worried that it will mean the product from cannabis will, within no time, exported all over the world, and people will find that there's no need to grow theirs and start buying that. But that guy said something very important, which is truth, that well, in that level, they have to sustain that level with heavy expenses. With us here, we have less expenses to do this. We can compete with them and we don't really need them so much. The market is here. If we need things we need, talk of clothing, building material, medicinal use, recreation. He didn't know that. Yeah, I think maybe I'm beaten by the age. Also, I'm 71 years old, and I grew up through cannabis. Now I start feeling things up to 70 years. I was like when I'm 20 years, not feeling much about things, always feeling strong. Even on cannabis will remain strong. Things won't happen as they want, and now it's the right time because also I'm not scared of being judged or put behind bars because I try to do the good thing all the time. So thank you very much for inviting me. And what I noticed almost all over the world, even in America, the poorest of the poor are not given a chance. Everything is steady. And many countries which were there, it's not us only in South Africa, all over the world. I even thought that maybe the leaders of the country meet somewhere, and when they meet on their meeting, they talk about cannabis, that we must block it. It must be for the poorest of the poor must remain poor and don't tap on this one. So like Metro said, we should fight strong and try and means of forcing them. And like doing, like the South African have started doing, the laws are not there yet, clear laws, but people are not sitting down. They're working very hard. They're doing what they want to do. So let's unite and continue working and strong. Thank you.
So can I chip in there quickly? On that note, it's amazing that it's happened in this room now where we brought the two ends of the country together. I thought I'm going to do it one day on a more informal basis. But I want to introduce High Commissioner Isak van Wyk and his team they represent the Songkhwa tribe of the Bushmen. It's really the biggest Bushman tribe in the country. And we also are very privileged to have, who's really the spiritual leader of the Bushmen in South Africa in the room too. So we've got these two custodians of cannabis in the country in the same room. So thank you, Greek, for being here and just introduce them quickly. High Commissioner Isak, over to you. 2 minutes.
Kan my stand? I understand this one. Okay, Cannabis. Goeienaand, good evening. Thank you for having us. Thank you. We're excited. And for so long, we've been fighting in silo. Also to become part of mainstream economic security. I'm coming from another side. I'm also coming from the policing side. So I've been with the intelligence and so forth. But with the tribe, which is the biggest tribe, Bushman tribe in South Africa, we've got 11 Bushman tribes, of which 5 is in the Western Cape and the others outside. With me, I'm very fortunate tonight, and all of us, we have done up Adrian Peter Marcus. He's the king of the Bushman tribe in the Western Cape, of the biggest tribe. Is with us this stand. And also legal expert on this matter. Also legal expert on this matter, and we've tried, we said, let's see, the emancipation of the tribe and all indigenous or, how do you call it, Khoi and San groups in the country cannot go without the economic emancipation. So for all ages, cannabis use has been part of all tribes and all indigenous tribes in South Africa. And that's why we've put, after a very short meeting with Nati on his farm at the cannabis lab, we have geared ourselves and we have now registered the First Nation Cannabis and Hemp Board of South Africa. So we are here with the custodians. We have got a lot of our members, even from Cape Town is here. I see in the house is also Wellington is here, the Paramount Chief or the Danab, and myself, we are from Johannesburg in the Swartland or West Coast District. So we're all over the country and we're moving strong to get things done. Ons wil goed nou laat gebeur. Ons het 'n lang toegekyk dat ander mense moet lead. Ons is die mense, ons represent die duisende mense wat vir jare onnodig toegesluit was, and we have grouped all the growers in the Western Cape and beyond in this vehicle. So we're pushing cannabis forward with heart and soul. Kangan.
This man over there, how many months back you were bussed for cannabis?
September?
Yeah, last year.
September now, a month ago.
A month ago, yeah. And paid the admission of guilt fine to get off.
No, that was...
No, that was earlier. It's crazy. I mean, they're still targeting these communities. I mean, this man's been through the mill these past few months.
Yeah, they arrested me in Northern Cape, Oakip, with 300 grams of ganja. 3 packs of 100 grams. We were 3 people in the car, in one bag at the back of my bucket. But just because I'm from Cape Town, those men in blue felt that it was okay for me to get arrested and my ganja confiscated, you know, but it's up in Springbok. So I paid admission of guilt because I can't travel up and down, expensive and all of that. And then a month ago, what, September, my son was in a roadblock, got with 9 grams, but the police, yet again, they got too much power, made it that he had 900 grams in his car so that they could come to my house. And then they got my whole grow room and all that, and everything was confiscated, lights and works, you know. So yeah, we're still getting arrested for that. So yeah, yes.
So that's why yesterday when the decriminalization of cannabis came up, I just said, well, it's not happened in South Africa yet. It's not decriminalized. We think it is, but it's not.
I thought I'd say, introduce myself to everyone. Hi there, everyone. My name's Cade Ross. For those of you who don't know me, I run a company. I recently opened up a company called Innovative Growing Tech SA. Quite a name, I know. IGT for short. Anyways, we do basically lights, tents, fans, filters, all the equipment that basically needed to cultivate your marijuana, so to speak. Sorry, not used to a large audience like this. But yeah, basically also try to educate the community on their rights, how many plants they're allowed to grow, which is always a difficult subject. So yeah, that's basically what I do. And then thank you very much.
It's all in the support industry.
Yes, thank you. Just follow up, you mentioned the 100 plants, they are allowed to grow. Today's stipulation around the 100 plants, they are allowed to grow.
Well, it depends on.
No. We don't know who is going to be watching this video. We're going to put it out there. So just once and for all, there is, in South Africa, there's a separation between the courts and the legislature, which the courts really, really stick to, because the government are always accusing the court of overstepping the mark. So the 2018 judgment, the way that it was written, there is no amounts. They're busy trying to push the plant counting on me, on all of us, okay? But I've asked in Parliament repeatedly for them to answer my question, who comes to my house to count my bottles of whiskey? And 2 years later, I'm still waiting for the answer. So until they can answer that question, there are no amounts. Who is going to go down to Pondo Land? Who's going to go down to Mpandi and take off their clothes and cross that river and put their clothes back on and check 3 hours up into the mountains?
Get into a barrel. Or get into a barrel together.
That we pulled across on a string across the river and go and count 1, 2, Ian, 2, 3. You know, who's going to do that? Because the overarching issue here is called cognitive liberty.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
if they're not going to come and count my bottles of whiskey, they can't come and count my dried dagga, my dagga plants, my amount of dagga oil, my amount of whatever, edibles, whatever I have on my property. So this is also an issue, we call it the issue of thresholds, which we dealt with class in their workshop with their field workers, is if we don't get this issue of thresholds sorted out for cannabis, what are we going to do with the rest of the things? Because if they put thresholds on us, it will be unconstitutional. Because we had Professor David Nutt in the trial of the plant speaking about his scale of harms. And what's at the top? It's alcohol. What's at the bottom? It's psilocybin mushrooms. And cannabis sits at number 7. Okay, so we have to regulate according to that scale of harm. So whenever, I always jump up when the issue of plant counting comes up, because I feel very, very strongly about this, very strongly. There will be, and it's, you know what it is plant counting? It's a colonial construct, because they're too lazy or stupid. What they do is they go and cut and paste the laws from Canada, don't they? Because now Germany,
Oh, Germany, it's legal. 2 plants. You're allowed at home.
What I'm going to do with 2 plants, smoke it.
One day.
I just want to answer that because that's a real activist answer, but there's another answer for academic side is that they are trying to quantify. There is this Cannabis for Private Purposes bill, which has been through several rounds of public participation. We've all made our inputs endlessly. They don't seem to be able to listen to it, and they are trying to, and they probably will push through a bill that
We will not accept it.
whether we accept it or not,
accept
it will be a
it.
bill
Yeah.
that goes, so I'm just trying to give you a background as academics that what we want, because we fight hard for what Myrtle's putting forward, but what government is putting forward is different to what we want at this stage of the game.
Okay.
Sorry.
Myrtle, I want to take your analogy a step further, and I know it's very controversial, but should roll mummy a joint be as acceptable as go pour mummy a glass of wine? For instance, I mean, the same analogy. Yeah. What about the children? Yeah. No, but anyway, that's just, I mean, that's how far you can take it, because it's completely acceptable. You can sit in a restaurant and have alcohol with your kids, and they can actually partake, which is more harmful. And they want to take that completely away, take the family completely away from our consumption of cannabis. And they can send us to jail for it and the cultivation of it.
Right now, we're
But,
facing 15 years for providing, not selling, okay, providing cannabis for a child.
Yeah.
So imagine that you have a child who is severely epileptic, and you decide that none of the doctor's medicine is working, but cannabis is working. You grow it, you make your own medicine, and you give it to your child. You're facing 15
Yes.
years.
But I mean, that's why that bill should just be completely rejected. We just should not accept it. I don't even talk about it anymore. It's just that thing that we don't speak about. Yeah. Yeah. It's insignificant. Yeah.
I just wanted to add about the quantification thing in terms of policing. So SAPS has a standing order in regards to cannabis policing, which was issued essentially when they became more confused as to what to do. And the principle among that, well, amongst other things in that standing order, is that officers are required to use their discretion. Now, discretion is a double-edged sword in the sense that one can have discretion that is useful and one can have discretion that is based on misunderstanding and a whole narrative of hatred and discrimination. Now, unfortunately, drugs occupy a specific moral framework within South Africa, of which cannabis is often associated, which we as South Africa tend to position drugs as, you know, the end and all. Once you have drugs, then it all goes to hell and there's crime and prostitution and next thing, nothing. So with that background in mind, when the police are asked to use discretion, this can create a system or a problem in which their discretion based on their training, which is also very much anti-drugs, ensures that they use it in a sense that will be as punitive as possible, frankly. And I mean, that's not to say that they are doing it on purpose, but rather that, you know, from the framework they occupy and the position they occupy and everyone's broader understanding about drugs in South Africa, that creates a prohibitionist system. It creates the continuation of a prohibitionist system in which people are taken for 3 grams or 300, whatever, but like, you know, minuscule amounts. So just keep that in mind, essentially. When and if you are arrested or deal with the cops. Also keep in mind that because it's discretionary, as a top tip here, try as far as possible to be civil and to be, you know, engaging with or follow the cops, because it's up to them as to what's going to happen. That's what discretion means. So I mean, I'm not trying to say be soft or anything, but you know, don't be antagonistic, because if you antagonize someone when they've got the discretion to choose your pathway down the chain, it's best to, you know, at least, no, you don't have to like be soft on them, but, you know, just follow the line for as much as possible. Now, sorry, that's just what the standing order says in terms of policing.
Thanks, Simon. Moses?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting debate.
Moses, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Moses Moyo. I'm here in the African Studies Department. And I do some research, but not on cannabis, but on agriculture. So normally some of these contested issues are interesting to see how they affect public policy. So I think what my question was, not question, my contribution was, we have had 2 sides of this story here, the activist, the academic side of this story. But if parliamentarians make decisions, they are looking at public good. I think that word public good, I don't know, what's the position on that public good? And added to that, you would notice when parliamentarians obviously think about the vote. If it's not bringing in the votes, and if they think it's bad for the people, they'll say, no, this we cannot support. Are we not venturing into that as well to balance off the whole thing?
Okay, that's a question that has been thrown to the house. Any contribution?
I was actually to want to, if you'd like to, Juanita, I'd just like you to speak to a bit about the role of women in your activism, and also how you helped so much to put together the mass action that we had in September, and how you think the future of that. Do we need more mass action? What mass action is a tool, please?
Hello,
She's an
everybody.
expert.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this discussion and for the presence in this room. When I walked in, I immediately felt a very, very high vibration, and that's always a good sign, number one. I am a cannabis activist. I am 32 years old, so I'm also classified a youth. So that's a very, very strong focus for me. I'm also a Black woman, a colored woman in Cape Town. So I represent people of color. And that is something that is very important in decision-making in our country. We've come from a very, very high and hectic time. I'm born free also. I have Zulu ancestry. My mother's from Durban, and my father literally had his house bulldozed in District 6. So if there's anybody that can talk about struggle and understands, and there's DNA memory about that, I do believe I am that representation. And the people of this country have DNA memory of what struggle is. And so I say that in this time, in 2022, there's been the synergy of, we've got the Gen Zs, they're very high and vibrant and out there and outspoken. And I feel that that's a very, very important thing in activism. Women is a very, very strong focus for me as well. There's been huge exclusion of women in policy making in general, never mind cannabis. So talking about inclusion, public participation, my journey started in 2016. Myrtle has been, and many others, many of you have been in the space longer than I have, but I can say that there's a huge demographic of youth under every skin tone that can relate to what needs to be done, what needs to be said. Decisions in policy making needs to include the people as a whole. And so I stand as the chairperson of the Cannabis Community Council. It was only birthed because of my activism, and it's just a channel now to represent female youth, people of color in South Africa, and broad. Everybody's welcome. I had a brief moment in the lift and outside on our way, and I said, it's all love. So when I come forward, it's a lot of passion, and sometimes that can be very misunderstood. But I am here as also a mother. I have been blessed to have 2 opportunities of pregnancy, 1 boy and 1 girl. My boy, I say, is my Bernardo baby. So I've done my fair share of research, right? I've been on the forefront. I've done my fair share of research. And my other baby, my beautiful cannabis baby, Yusra, is a ball of joy, right? And I decided to do my own little research, and I went through my pregnancy using cannabis. I know in Rastafari, it's a great way. And I was in these spaces, and I'm like, you know what? Why? Well, what are these ancient teachings that nobody's, this is a healthy lady. I want to be like this too. And I rejected Western medicine. My female daughter is very healthy. Proud to announce she's very healthy. And so that's something I advocate for too. So in a nutshell, I'm a hybrid, if you will, in representation of what cannabis should be in South Africa. I've also contributed and offered my activism in the cannabis mass action gathering, where we successfully handed over a memorandum to a government official, which is a step forward, but we do need to create and keep that as a tone, of unity. Everybody's talking about unity, so we must show that unity. I'm telling you, I'm coming from the people, the youth that is looking at all of this and going, what are these people doing? I'm also very good, right? I'm also very good at taking the message of what government puts out and turning it into relatable language. So when you do see me online and I am a bit out there, right? It's only because I'm strategically acknowledging a demographic that has completely been excluded from any communication and understanding. That is why, sir, you got arrested. So let me tell you something about that, right? If we educate the people, right? I'm not saying that it's going to get us out of a sticky spot, but I am saying that lots of the youth are signing admissions of guilt. It is 10 years of your life gone, and that frustrates me because my children must come up in that. And so when we are educated and we understand what our constitution says, we don't have to be for market, as we say right here in Cape Town. We don't have to be that way, but we can stand as educated folk. And so I want to say thank you. That needs to be acknowledged. It's just the message coming through, that it's the people that speak. And so that is what the Cannabis Community Council is. We exclude no one. We are open to working with everyone. We've recently been involved, Nati, with the Umzimvumu Farmer Support Network with the river, some fundraising over there. So, I mean, it was only registered in February. I do believe that organizations like ours require relevant support to be able to motor through the space. I am literally trying to suck up with the last bit of energy, that I have in the community to say, come guys, man, let's go, let's do this together. But everybody's tired. And it takes a long, strong, thick-skinned person to motor through the space. And let me tell you who those people are. It's the youth. So don't forget them.
Information. So online we have Raswar Yellow Man, who put your comment also on the previous discussion around the plan and counting and all that. So you say that subsidy of the resources to plan count is totally impossible and unsustainable. Why is government trying to continue punitive measures for cannabis when you don't have such measures for alcohol? The science has proven that alcohol is more harmful. So I just needed to make sure that our colleagues who are online, they are also participating in this discussion. But Moses said you asked a question, which I just want us to help. If there's someone who wants to contribute to the question, yeah. I know that we'll be Edioma. I'd like to say,
Edioma, can you just introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Ediomo Bongas and I'm from Nigeria.
Louder also.
I'm basically a researcher, but I've also worked in other capacities, providing services for people who use drugs. If I understand the comment you made very well, I think that the policy process is usually more complex, than just the public good. I think if I take a cue from Nigeria, sometimes political and economic considerations are usually more salient than the public good. And I don't think there's a stable, consistent definition of public good. I think that policy should take into consideration the interests, the concerns of everybody. So, and what's happening here is one of the ways of registering the concerns of this community that needs to be reflected, in policy making. So I think that this is, let's understand that policy making is more political than it is, even evidence. That's the truth. So we also need, while we, muster the evidence, let's be ready to play the politics. Yeah.
Do we have any contributions on this?
Yeah, I can comment a little bit on that. I think it's complicated. If you think that the person who wrote the bill was the same government representative who opposed Russ Prince in the Cape Town High Court when he was going towards getting cannabis legalized for whatever use it was. It was the Constitutional Court chose to rule on using cannabis for private purposes. They could have ruled on a whole number of areas. They just chose to rule to make it legal in that one. So we actually had a prohibitionist writing the new legislation. And then that same prohibitionist never came and spoke to the people that had advocated for cannabis reform. He just wrote the legislation in the most severe way he could possibly have written. Okay, so that's the first thing. So we had a bill that was brought before Parliament that was restrictive and conservative. Secondly, we have a public and a parliamentary base that is not educated in the cannabis value chain, in cannabis uses, in anything really. And no one really took the time to start at the beginning and say, this is what it looks like. Cannabis has been grown here. Cannabis can be used for this, et cetera, et cetera. It was used like this historically. It helped, grow the Industrial Revolution, et cetera. We didn't have that. So we started in the middle, and then there's always this concern in it's valid. That drugs are a problem, especially because cannabis is often mixed with mandrax, mixed with niope. People don't know that either. They just see that their kids are taking this stuff and their lives are falling apart. And so we landed up with this cocktail of poorly thought through prohibitionist thinking that was forced down our throats. And then we tried to come up with things, and the parliamentarians, I believe, did try and play to the public good. At some stage, they even considered rejecting it completely, this bill. I don't think they're going to now. They're going to pass it probably now, next month. But that's I hope that answers it a little bit better. It's not simple.
Yes. Okay, I'll take him and then we come to you.
I'm coming back later. I just want to react.
Okay. So he said you can go back.
You introduce yourself, Keith.
Yeah, my name is Keith Scott. I'm the co-founder of the South African Drug Policy Initiative. I co-founded it with a colleague of mine who was the Dean of Medicine at this university. And on our board, we have another previous Dean of Medicine who's a Zulu man, who's a professor here. And we have Anine Kriegler, who's part of this faculty. She's a criminologist. And a lot of our members are professional people, doctors, lawyers, etc. So that's where I come from. But the point I'd like to make in terms of what's been discussed here, a couple of points. When that Constitutional Court ruling came out, the first thing I realized was that it excluded most poor people, millions of people in this country. It was pretty obvious that a huge number of people could not grow cannabis in their private space because they didn't have it. And if they smoked it in the street, which is a public place, they'd be arrested. If they smoked it in their shack, they'd be arrested because there was a child in there. Oh, yeah. And I happened to meet one of the judges who was in the Western Cape High Court who initiated this whole thing, which was we know what a good thing that was. And I said to him, did you realize what you did, as good as it was, and this Constitutional Court ruling, which followed up on the Western Cape ruling, that it excluded millions of people who lived in shacks? Did you think of that at the time? Yes. And he looked at me and he said, and I said, did you think of that when the constitutional ruling came out? He said, I never considered that. And I said, this decision was made by middle-class people who weren't considering the poor people, which you brought up. Yes. So that is the sort of thing we faced with. Even people they think they're doing good, but it's unintentional. And who was targeted by the police? The poor people in the informal settlements. And the same thing happened during COVID lockdown when the government banned alcohol. These are the sort of, this is what we're up against. It's a lot of subconscious stuff. The public was warned that they were going to stop the sale of alcohol and tobacco. And we given 3 or 4 days. A lot of people I knew, they stocked up, lots of booze, cigarettes, etc. And then boom, they closed it down. So all the people who had a space and the money to store the stuff would sit there in front of their TVs and they'd say, yes, look at that guy who's just been arrested and beaten up by the army in the informal settlements because he went to a shebeen and he bought a beer and they caught him. And the wealthy people are sitting there drinking their whiskeys. Yeah, that guy's breaking the law. And that's the sort of thing we're up against. And I did a lot of interviews at the time and colleagues of mine in my organization, and we pointed that out to the media. And the guys, most people didn't think of that. And I said, that is a problem. We've got the people who are making decisions, as you've said, and a lot of people said they're not going to the people on the ground. And what is their problem? And that's what we've got now. We've got the police are arresting the easy targets. So I just mentioned that it's very important that we deal with that. And another quick thing, obviously you're from the Cape Flats. I've been to a lot of meetings out there with a colleague of mine who's also on the board, and he is a community leader in the Cape Flats. And the problem there is that most people, in my experience, going to quite big meetings, is that the people in general blame everything on the drugs. And we're trying to convince them it's not the drugs, it's the laws. And it's the people who are, the kids who are brought up. We have people who've got fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. They cannot cope with life and they end up taking drugs. They're exploited by the police and the gangs, and they become cannon fodder. 12% of people in Western Cape are born with fetal alcohol syndrome. So these people are totally neglected and they're exploited. One thing I just wanted to bring up quickly, you mentioned the Transform, this organization in the US, in the UK, and they've got a branch called Anyone's Child. And that is, what they've done is they've got people together who've lost loved ones to drugs, who've realized that the problem is not the drugs they were taking, but it's the laws. This is in the UK. And they've made some progress in getting the politicians to listen to these people on the ground and hearing their stories. And they've actually got a branch in Kenya. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. We're trying to get a branch started here. It's called Anyone's Child. .com, I think it is, and it's part of the Transform NGO. And that's where I agree, we have to get to the youth and we have to get to the people who are actually suffering, but it's to educate them that the problem is not the drugs, it's the drug laws. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May you allow me to take Ras Warren and then we come to the house again so that Ras Warren, you can go ahead and make your contribution or ask a question if you have one.
Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wow, what an honor and opportunity to chat to you guys all the way from the Eastern Cape. Give thanks even to Kensite ones and ones in the audience there. Just a shout out to Myrtle, Raspol, Connie, Nati, and the rest of the crew. My comment today is coming from someone that has experienced both urban cannabis and rural cannabis, and also the value chain that links the two. And I've started to notice that because of an unregulated environment, or an environment that is being regulated by gray area, it is having a severe impact on the so-called legacy cannabis growers, the ones that have been keeping the fire burning for the past 100 years. A lot of the cannabis in the Eastern Cape can't be sold because we've got an unregulated market or a gray area market that is dumping so-called legal cannabis from SAPRA facilities through the back door onto the market. And this means that there's less people traveling into Amapondo, to Mpande, to Tabankulu, to Coffee Bay to go and buy that cannabis. It's causing poverty. It's causing a lot of issues in which even bribe money has increased, because the cops have noticed that not a lot of people or lesser people are coming to buy lesser amount of cannabis. I mean, you can hire a certain cop vehicle for 1,000 Rand to transport your cannabis from the grow areas into the cities of Mthatha. I mean, that is trade has been going on for years, but that amount has increased because lesser people are doing this. More so-called legal, unregulated SAPRA cannabis is being dumped on the market. And I feel very strongly about this is because most of these people that have these licenses have not been arrested. They have not fought for this plant. They have not struggled like the most of us legacy growers, but yet we are being excluded. Even the way government is going about having discussions around the cannabis for privacy bill, totally excluding the voices on the ground. I mean, where is the contribution by our legacy growers? Where's the contribution by our Amapondo growers, our Transkei growers, and all the legacy growers across the country? So I would feel strongly that all of these bodies that represent us as legacy growers make it a point that we are involved in all the discussions when it comes to drafting the so-called bill, and we reject the bill unanimously. We as legacy growers, we reject it outrightly. It does not represent us. It does not hold our interests. I mean, this weekend was the Cannabis Expo, where the elite of the elitists gather in the most expensive square meter in Africa to showcase the most elitist cannabis products in Africa. Where were we as legacy growers? We will have to kind of hide in the shadows and come across as individuals that support this, but we don't support this at all. You are totally excluding us, and it's very. However, that being said, it's promising to see, UCT allowing a platform of this nature where people can come around a table, we as activists, to kind of bring that Ubuntu back, to say that nothing about us without us. You will have to listen to us if you want to get this right. So my plea is to each and every one on that panel and that is having this discussion is to find common ground amongst each other and to stand up against especially these punitive measures. We can't criminalize cannabis when we've just decriminalized cannabis. That is going backwards. This legislation is not progressive at all, and it's going to cause more harm than any good. So from someone who's seen, urban cannabis to rural cannabis and a little bit in between, I would urge that there's an inclusive attitude and inclusive atmosphere of change when we draft a cannabis bill. So thank you very much for this opportunity. More love and more fire. Give thanks.
Warren is one of our Fields of Green team in the Eastern Cape.
Thank you so much, Warren.
The legacy growers, who are these? So I'm hearing it for the first time.
I can explain to you about the legacy growers. So
you can do that quickly so that we take the other.
Yeah. So legacy growers are people, we have a history of cannabis use, cultivation and trade for over 700 years. And these are the people who use, cultivate and trade cannabis in order to provide for their livelihoods and their education of their children generationally. They've been doing this for generations. Okay, and it doesn't only mean people in the rural areas, there've also been people in the urban areas in our carcinomic economy, as we call it, who have also generationally been getting cannabis from the rural areas, transporting it usually by way of minibus taxi, and usually it's the women who are the transporters to the township to also feed that economy. So our legacy, and it stretches all the way over South Africa, and it's both rural and urban.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take Jacques and then we'll go to Jeffers and then we'll come back again to the house. So if we can try to be quick, because the next steps I would want us now to agree on what are the areas that we need. For example, we have two groups here, the academics, activists. Going forward, what is it that we need to do? So you can go ahead, Jacques. We'll take Jeffers and then we'll go to the Paramount Chief. And maybe the last contribution, then we go into what next. Yes.
Hi guys, I'm Joao Clifford. I am owner of Urbanville.
You can speak up so that the mics can.
It's Nature's Pharmacy in Brackenfell. So basically, I think I represent a part of the conversation that hasn't really been mentioned here, and that is the recreational users. With the Constitutional Court ruling, obviously came the right for every South African to use and cultivate this plant in their private space. And obviously with that bill or that being passed, there were a lot of people that were excluded. The guys that can't afford it, the guys that don't have the space. There are so many people that are completely being pushed aside because of the way they're currently doing it. And from a club owner who I've got my own struggle that I'm not going to get into, getting to Urbanville where we are right now, it's basically impossible for me to make a connection with the legacy guys, with any of these guys, to try and through the recreational space, get these guys into the space where they're supposed to be. And I think that's something that needs to be discussed is how the connection is going to be made, not only for medical and but how we're going to pull in the legacy guys and the youth. I've got thousands of youth members that come to my door every day that want to make a difference, that want to speak up, that want to do something. They don't have a platform. And I think something like this is very important for, I almost want to go as far as to say the old school guys to meet the new school guys and to see where there's synergy and to see where we can come together and make something better out of the situation that we're in. Anyway, thank you. That's all I wanted.
Thank you so much. Jeffias, online, you can come in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. My name is Jeffias and I'm in Zimbabwe. I'm quite interested in the subject under discussion. And my contribution is simple, is to say, colleagues, I think it is high time we base our arguments on empirical evidence. After getting empirical evidence on the cannabis value chain, particularly for those communities that are marginalized, then we come up with a petition to our governments to make sure that whatever claims we make, they are informed by empirical evidence. I am totally in agreement with the fact that there are so many people who are disadvantaged. They are locked out of the value chain of cannabis. It is high time that we involve them so that they benefit. But we need the economic analysis. How will it benefit an ordinary woman in a street, an ordinary woman or a young man who is unemployed and operating in a rural area? It is high time we put our minds together, document these things, communicate our interests to our governments, and perhaps at a lateral and multilateral level. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeffias. So he's already speaking to some of the issues we were going to be dealing with regarding the way forward. The chief wanted to make a contribution earlier on. Let me honor him and give him the space.
Give thanks to everyone. I'm PC Marcus. I just want to add some contribution. Apparently, not at present, me and Gerald Prince is now not appealing, filing another case. We are waiting now for a full bench of judges. We have filed our case, and for about more than a year now, we were waiting for the DPP in response of our application. So I was only here yesterday after we have approached the President Judge about the behavior of the DPP of not doing their constitutional responsibility by administrating their duties effectively. So the judge sent them a letter, so they sent their responding affidavits on Friday to the High Court. So I haven't had time to scrutinize and react on it, but as soon as we have finalized that, we have filed the case in Gerard Prince. But I ran out this case. I was in contact a couple of years ago with Fields of Greens and asked in your assistance. Was under Adrian Marcus at the time. So I was part and parcel of the 2016, the High Court judgment in Cape Town. I was part of the 18th, apparently also of the 2018 judgment. And my question was also onto the judge president. There was a verdict in 2018 that Parliament did have 2 years to conduct that verdict. Now, if the government, the present government doesn't comply, what are your responsibility to if somebody breaches their conditions it is a bit late before him. You're supposed to take and rectify it. So there's still, the government is busy with the bill, so they are waiting the bill to be passed. So they are in the process. That will be their response. But like I want to request, I'm running it as a head of a tribe also on a cultural level because I have also include in my case the UNDRIP, the Decolonization Act, because in other laws that I will include also in my application that is onto indigenous people's rights. And we as indigenous cultural people, for us to get this thing right is to, you see, the truth cannot be denied. One thing, we come to the bush with the parliament, but the government is us. We run away from our responsibility to take control. That now we want to put the blame on everybody but except us. You see, we are bright minds and we all know we must come together and construct a plan, and those that have the resources, put in their resources, and we run up a smooth plan and run over this for once and for all. Because my application is not, because also in traditional, in the kingdom, Kokokwa kingdom, which I serve, also as I'm also in the Ministry of Fauna and Flora, which I'm busy with agreements with Cape Nature, for tissue culture and also for cannabis and all those things. My commissioner will broaden you about all the activities of the tribe. But we need actually a collective approach from all of us, even in our cultural tradition. The women are the matriarchs of our societies. They are the rulers of our communities and our houses. We must come back to that was taken, the colonialization mind, to beat this system. And we must come back to our history. Nothing can deny the true history of Africa. And we cannot worship any god with other man's spectacles. We as Africans, we know what is the truth. So we as Africans can save all of the whole world, because this law wasn't signed without our prior informed consent. As indigenous people of the country. So we have a right to approach them. True. And based on that, if we can get my tribe is not about color, about spirituality. We are the elementary people of the earth. I'm a waterman. So we are the elements of the earth. We are not this religion thing. We are the spirits of the earth. That's why we are traditional. We are the life of the earth, but we are denied the recognition which we are supposed to give one another so that we can overrun, because we are each and everybody a piece of gold, a goldfish upon the earth. And we let others dictate to us because of our lack of proper planning, proper strategizing.
So much. Yeah, it will be short. Because we're going to go forward and we only talk about the Cannabis for Private Purposes bill, I just want to put on the table that the government seems to be going back to the beginning on the terms of the master plan. So they are doing a whole sector competitive strategy about, which is what you meant to do first before you develop a master plan. I think it speaks to what you just spoke about. There's a real opportunity for us now, because there'll be proper stakeholder engagement across all stakeholders, especially focused on how to bring indigenous and smallholder farmers into the mainstream. That this is going to go on for the next 9 months, starting in January. And then there is an intention in the presidency using private funding to write a single cannabis bill. So separate to what's going on in government. And then to ask the Minister of Agriculture to propose that to Parliament. And that's also hopefully going to happen in the first quarter of next year. So I think things are coming together on a level. There's definitely forces of good that are mobilizing and people are working together. And there is, like I say again, what the chief is saying, it really is up to us. And so we need to be clear about what we want, and we have to be clear how to achieve that within the limitations of our international treaty obligations.
Okay.
Because we have to exist within the realm of international law, which in itself isn't very prohibitive, but that's it for me.
Nick, why do we need separate cannabis legislation? Why can't we just look in the Liquor Act and in our Welfare Act and in our Medicines Act and all over our other acts for the solutions for cannabis? Why do we need separate legislation for cannabis? I mean, why do we need a cannabis bill? Explain that to us.
But you have an alcohol legislation.
Yeah, but I mean, we can find within that the space for cannabis.
In the alcohol.
Substances.
I don't know. I think anyone can sit in a room and say whatever you want.
No, but I'm just asking, I just can't see why we need this whole separate cannabis bill and all these arguments around it. And I agree with the chief, government is in contempt of court. Who's holding them to that today? I mean, yeah, great, fantastic.
But somebody needs to take accountability. So just to answer your question, Chief, thank you so much for your comments, most insightful, is that we are in the process of going back to Pretoria. So to hold the government in contempt of court, maybe they will pass the bill before we get back to Pretoria, but there's so many things happening at once. So if they pass the bill before we go back to Pretoria, we'll challenge the bill, okay, in court. Because I don't think that there's very much chance of, as Jeff Diaz from Zimbabwe was saying, we have to have the evidence heard. And that's one of our biggest challenges at the moment, is to have the evidence heard on the harms of cannabis. Good of the plant, put it over there, but it's the harms of cannabis that concern, that their perceptions of the harms of cannabis that concern us the most appeal to Green. And then we also have we feel very strongly about cannabis private clubs. And what I always say about the clubs is that you should be able to run a club from an exercise book in an informal settlement. Because there's all sorts of people peddling all of their fancy software, and yes, that's fine, but you should be able to run that club and keep a register of your stock and your members in an exercise book. Maybe this is 2022 and we can use a smartphone, because everybody's got a smartphone, okay? So the systems that are being promulgated around South Africa to run your club are so complicated. So don't listen to anybody when they say you need compliance stuff. There's no law to comply with for a cannabis club. You can open up your club and you say, right, these are my friends. These are the people I've been selling to for a long time. These are my members. You get them to sign a piece of paper to say that I become a member of your club. You can charge them R1 a year as a membership fee. You know,
They can come talk to me, I'll help them do it.
Yes, and then you keep a record of your stock, where you get your stock from, and where your members are, and then you cook the books to have enough stock to provide your members.
Yes.
Easy as that. It's not legal, but it is like this. It's not legal, but it is as close to legal as we possibly can. Don't let anybody tell you that a cannabis private club is legal, because it is not. You are still trading in cannabis, but it's as close as we can get. Okay, so that's a very important thing. And then we are also fighting in court 3 other cases. So there's the Hayes Club case, okay, which was just dismissed by the Western Cape High Court in what I thought was a very poorly argued case and a very poorly written judgment. So it was a combination of unfortunate circumstances on both of it. They've just been given leave to appeal. Then we are also supporting Bernadette Enova in the Labour Court. She was fired from the big company called Barlow World. We've been through the Labour Court. She lost again because she was poorly represented, and it was a bad judgment by an acting judge who wrote it incredibly quickly. She has been granted leave to appeal in the Labour Court of Appeal in Johannesburg, so we are supporting her. And then we are also working with the Centre for Applied Legal Studies at Wits University to bring an interdict against the police. That we're working with Russ Gareth and Fields of Green for All, and Charles, who is our victim support manager, who mans that 24-hour arrest helpline. So I don't think that it's really possible to state now what the way forward is. Okay, I think you can disagree with me if you want, but I think that there's all the different aspects of it, and we can bring those aspects together under the 4 platforms for the trial of the plant. So we have to look at responsible adult use, as we always call it. That's the umbrella. Because unless they recognize our cognitive liberty, we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to end up treating sick people and making socks. Yeah, so we can't do that. So responsible adult use is the umbrella. And then underneath that, we have uses for health. It's not medical cannabis. That's prescription cannabis. And that's SAPRA. And they must stick in their corner. Okay, it's uses for health. Then you have industrial cannabis, of which we have no history in Southern Africa of industrial cannabis, but we can develop an industry, but it will take time. So don't put your hopes on industrial cannabis, hemp as they like to call it. And then the most important platform of all, and is where it makes us unique in South Africa, unique and in the rest of Africa. And I see that Henry, hello Henry from Youth Rise, Henry from Youth Rise in Nigeria, who I got to know on my visit. I think that what the other people from Nigeria all the way down to South Africa have to realize in Africa is that we have this unique position, and that is called traditional, cultural, and religious use. And we have things like the highly flawed IKS bill. We have our Bill of Rights, which enshrines our right to freedom of religion. So we already have those things in South Africa. So if you want to be familiar with the way forward, I would really, really encourage everybody. I'm going to make up a database here and write an email to everybody who's here today so that you can stay in contact. And I think that the best way to do that is for everybody to stay in contact here is to sign up to the various organizations' newsletters, okay, as well as Fields of Green's newsletters, okay, and then and to stay in contact. Use social media. Okay? Use all the technology that we've got now in 2022, soon to be 2023. And then what our plans are for Fields of Green going forward is that we are going to be calling 2023 is the year of the OG. Now in cannabis speak, that's the originals, the landrace people. So it rhymes really nicely, 2023, the year of the OG. And I think we'll make that a theme for the year. And having met everybody here today, most of you who I know already, I will circulate all the various websites, email addresses, Sandput, South African Drug Policy Initiative, Jacques Club, Umzimvubu Farmer Support Network. Where do you find them? On YouTube and so on. And then I have to just leave it up to you and amazing people like Juanita to stay in touch. And please ask everybody to have the responsibility that you stay. We can't always be speaking to everybody. We also need people like the brother over there who got involved with Jeremy and Garrett's case and ended up being a plaintiff in the Western Cape High Court. And you are absolutely correct. You were one of the people that achieved our judgment in 2018. It was the best and the worst judgment ever. You know? So, and through our Join the Queue program, I'm not Victoria alone. I have 100 stays of prosecution in the queue behind me. And that is people who listen to Fields of Green, people who listen to Jeremy and Gareth, joined their case, and are still, as I stand here before you, I've been out on bail for 12 years. And so all those other people in the queue behind me have also been out on bail for years and years and years. So I would encourage people to please stay in contact. And then that's from an activism point of view, stay in contact. And then I'll hand over to Clemens to say what the way forward is for the Cannabis Africana project.
Thank you so much, Mentor. And I think yes, so I think you have already helped us to address one aspect of this stage we are taking positive in terms of activities, various groupings and all that. You've already addressed some of the issues that we need to do going forward, and we need to work closely and we need to to stay in touch and all that. So I think that's very important. Then this is the question that we are asking as the Cannabis Africana. What role do you want us to play going forward as Cannabis Africana? We know that there are struggles, there's the experience that we have in the field, which we don't have, but what we know is how to do research, and also the evidence that Jeffers was talking about. So what role do you think Cannabis Africana can play in this partnership going forward? And for that, we don't know the answer ourselves, but we rely on hearing from people like you. If there's any role that you think we can play and in being a partner going forward, which can be of value to the struggles that you are undertaking. You can show by raising your hand, make your contribution, and we'll be able to capture that. It's being recorded also, and then we'll be able to follow up on that so that we take the next step. We make it practical. Yes.
Evening, everyone. It's Sham Samai. I'm Director of the Women's Legal Center. I just have one with regard to a way forward in relation to the just research, whether or not you can capture, for example, the live realities of people on the ground to be able to use that in terms of submissions, whether or not it's submissions to Parliament, etc. Because there are changes within our constitutional court, and to be able to, if those cases will be able to bring in that particular research, and other cases can be used to be able to see how that research can be brought to the court. But one of the cases, for example, that we did, we're doing a myriad of cases, which includes the crime of sex work. But for example, with regard to our domestic workers, one of the issues is to bring in friends of the court, to bring in the evidence of researchers before those cases. I mean, I know that many people have tried that, but that is how we use most of the research, and to be able to bring that before particular structures. So that is just one of the ways that I think it can be used in different forms, whether or not in terms of advocacy in Parliament, before the courts, or even just to be able to bring that through in terms of communities. I just thought that it will possibly help.
Thank you so much. It's very clear and very important. Any more contributions? Yes.
Is it possible for the Africana Cannabis to kind of get to the AU to start pushing a national African policy towards not just cannabis, but all drugs, but cannabis in particular? Because I think if a conversation can start high up, I know a lot of African countries are very anti-drugs, because that's obviously the devil's work, but how can research and evidence-based information be taken to the AU with an academic background? So it's not activists or people that are seen in a lower light, but people that are academics that are looking for solutions. Is it not possible to make a link with the AU to then start feeding positive, correct information, as Jafar said earlier?
Thank you so much. I'll ask you again not to just comment on that. You can also comment on the recent meetings that we had with the West African drug.
I think it always depends on who is interested in our research. That's the general thing. The research sometimes is out there, but nobody wants it often. So it's a matter of finding somebody who's actually interested. with the AU, it's a bit of a tricky thing. We actually had an advisory board member from the African Union on our project. So I think it's worth going back to them as well. But it really depends what kind of views they want to hear sometimes. So I think sometimes, I think also linking to the first issue, it is maybe for us as researchers, what we can actually provide is for you to know what there's actually, we are not the only ones doing research on this. There's a lot of people doing research, not necessarily on African countries. You know, there's a lot done on the US now because policies have changed. So I think in the legal cases, you have drawn on that as well. But there's quite a bit done on African countries as well. So if you actually, you can almost be like, how do you say that? A place where you can ask if there's some research done and we could sort of point you in the right direction. So that's one thing I think in terms of expertise and research that already exists in addition to our one. With the West African Drug Policy Network, it's interesting. They actually reached out to us and wanted to hear what kind of research we do. So because they have, by chance, they heard about us because they also went to that conference that Myrtle, Ediomo, and we went to. So I think the struggle we have sometimes is actually, we have the sort of not the knowledge, but the expertise or the sort of the writing about it, but we don't know who to go to basically. So I think it's these kind of meetings that actually help us as well, because we know there's people, you know, working on farmers' experience. Did they actually have did they know about farmers' real life experience, so we can actually talk to them and link them to people that want to hear those voices. But it's not easy sometimes with the AU and with these kind of networks. It's not just like giving them the kind of evidence or the articles, they will read it and change their policies, unfortunately.
The Fields of Green for All is also in the process of working towards accreditation with the AU, because we have ECOSOC status at the United Nations. So that means United Nations Economic and Social Council, every year they choose a few new NGOs to join the network, which gives us the opportunity to participate, ask questions, and also create side events with the big Commission on Narcotic Drugs that happens every March in Vienna. But our experience of the United Nations, while it's been important and it's taught us a lot, is it's very, very broad. So we're up against countries like Turkey and Russia and Iran, because there's 190 member states. So as our lawyers told us really early on, some people you're never going to convince. You know, you're never going to convince the Turkish Green Crescent that cannabis is not a drug. It's just practically impossible. But that is why we're looking into it. It was actually on the suggestion of the Traditional and Natural Health Alliance of Anthony Rees from the TNHA that the AU has opened up the network for NGOs now. So hopefully within the next few months, we've started the process. We will get an accreditation at the AU, and hopefully that will bring it closer to home, because it feels like with the UN, it really is kind of like a drop in the ocean. I mean, we can shout and scream, and some cannabis activists have actually been thrown out of the building in Vienna for staging protests, and we're not allowed to wear any clothes that have any slogans on or any drug paraphernalia or anything like that. Very strictly even about what you're allowed to wear into the building. So I'm hoping that next year, as we are on our newsletters and within our networks and social media and everything, yeah, we hopefully will be able to get that accreditation and slowly inch it closer to home.
Okay, thanks, Metro. So, yes. So I'll take, okay, I'll take 1 and 2. There's another hand here. Yeah. Yes, 3. And because of our time, and also people have some more suggestions, they can even email and communicate. Yes.
Yes. So for home trade nation, we are a nation representing a nation. So we are challenging government head on in terms of exclusion, like Ross Yellow from Eastern Cape said, the role players. So I think, I feel like this research being done can give not subsistence, but can support. We are in the process of acquiring a farm or buying a farm, and we want to apply for a license. So we're trying and we want to use all the legalities and everything, so we don't have that expertise. And there's where you can come in and breed, because we now listen here, we're talking about the people in the poorest of the poorest townships and on the rule of the rules areas of South Africa. Well, of course, we're covering an area of 282,000 square kilometers. So we want to try challenge them head on with your support.
Much. Yes, hi. Steve Murrow. I'm not an activist, and I'm not an academic.
What are you? What are you?
I'm a cannabis user. Okay, and I got involved in this with Myrtle earlier in the year when I went to see her about something else. I do fund a couple of guys who grow cannabis. I got into it by accident, but I use it and believe it should be legal. So I feel very strongly about it. What I'm seeing here today is an amazing group of people, all walks of life. And I haven't heard one piece of rubbish spoken here today. You've all spoken from the heart. You're all very sincere about this, and you can all see a way forward with this. And there's so many angles to it. In the line of academia, you have salaries, you have buildings, you have authority. Your integrity is what we need in the space where we are. Because maybe we're trying to legalize something we shouldn't be, or maybe we're trying to legalize it the right way. But the integrity of the academic research is critical to the success of any legal case and anything we want to turn around and say. On the activist side, I'm sure you all find it very, very difficult to raise money for those activities. Some of the things we've been talking about today, you pointed out so nicely, is the age group. Where the rise will come from is the youth. We need to be reaching that youth using modern technology, because everybody else says, and they're watching rubbish, we might as well watch something decent. And you only have to get the TikTok thing right, and we'll get that nailed on the head. But you've been fascinating to listen to. And I just want you all to know that as a guy who dabbles in it from time to time, I really appreciate the time and effort that all of you have been putting in to legalize this and make it acceptable in society as it should be. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to mention that I've heard us talk about, partnership, networking locally, but you could also think of networking with international organizations too, particularly in regards to what you said, getting across to ECOWAS. I think organizations like the International Drug Policy Consortium already have strong, working relationships with ECOWAS and AU, and you could simply leverage this. Then I heard about Sandput. There's also, I think the international body also has this, because I know that the Nigerian network of people who use drugs, they've leveraged the international relationship to also push advance their work. So I think that when you're thinking of regional, bodies, it's easier to reach them if you're in contact with the international organization.
It's like putting Juanita in touch with Henry from Youth Rise.
Yes, and Maria Coretti.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 55, I'm old lady. You know, but Henry,
middle-aged Myrtle,
Henry and his and Youth Rise Nigeria, I hung out with when I was in Nigeria, and so also we'll put that on the list of things to do.
Yes, yeah. So, and I think in addition to that, there's a research that academics usually publish. It's long papers. There are other very good, better ways of, for example, of communicating such research that is published maybe in journals, things like police papers, where it's a shortened version, trying to summarize communication or whatever the key findings were found there. So I think that if we could, when we produce such also, then we could share also with the network through through network and colleagues. There are also other forms of communication that we could use to summarize the same. So I think those are some of the things.
Just add one, sorry, was there somebody else? Yeah. We actually were planning to do a little network as part of our project, actually that links academics, policymakers, and activists in one group, and that would probably meet in some kind of online way, because we want to get people from various parts of the continent and of the research communities together. So I think not all those sessions that we are planning for might be of interest. Some of them are very historical, maybe, and some of them might be on specific issues. But I think if people were interested in joining this network, because there you will have a chance to meet somebody who works on, for example, we have a colleague who just wrote a book on drug policy in Tanzania and how that has recently changed and what kind of lessons they learned. They had quite a unique harm reduction drug policy approach in that country, but they have been backtracking recently on this kind of thing. So we are trying to, maybe, I don't know if that would be of interest, for people to use this kind of network as a platform as well to meet other people across African countries, because I think sometimes these debates, even legal cases, I've seen that often this gets dominated by Western experiences and expertise, but I think there's actually a lot in many, and I think especially in South Africa with that experience, of the change of policy and the different ideas on it. But I think there is really room for sharing across the African countries. So I think that network might help to do that. So I think if people are interested, I think for legal reasons, we can't force you onto the network because of data protection issues, but we can invite you. If somebody is interested, they can just join. So we'll do that in the near future as well, if that sounds interesting.
So you'll get in, everybody here that's with their name on the list, you'll get an email from us giving you certain links and websites and whatever, then it's up to you. Join the, say, Fields of Green newsletter or Cannabis Africana's newsletter or whatever, but we'll send out a whole lot of resources. I'll tell you how to get a hold of Sandput. I'll tell you how to get a hold of UFSN and everybody.
I just wanted to comment on this idea of speaking to yourself and then ending up clapping for yourself again. I'm raising this from my other work, like let's say with activists in agriculture and other things. Normally, they're very important things, but they are all speaking to themselves and they're thinking for it. For instance, in this platform, you can see some of the important stakeholders are not even represented, like the church, the other social organizations, social structures that are within yourselves. And yet they are very important political players, like he said, in all this whole process. Probably I'm wondering how can research inform that or get these parties to speak to each other?
Thank you so much, Moses. And I want to thank everyone for having me as your chair, and we have had a fruitful discussion. Mentor and Simon, any last words and concluding remarks?
Yeah, I'd just like to really thank everybody for making the effort to come out tonight. And I think it's been incredibly, it's planted a seed. And it's really
Thank you, Bertel, for helping organize all of this.
Yeah, and thanks, Nati, as well, was very instrumental in bringing lots of people together tonight.
Thanks. This is an amazing group of people that I don't think have been in an academic, together in an academic organization like UCT at all ever. And for that reason, I think it's important that this is perhaps one of the first times I've seen, at least in terms of engagements, that people from a lot of different life and places and positions have come together to discuss what is ultimately a central topic to everyone's concern. Thank you. And we'll be in contact.
Ek was ook, ek hoop nie dat ek was.
Thanks to Neil for filming it. Put it on our YouTube and I'll circulate the